But now we have our only panel for the entire summit with 3 incredible men from 3 different continents. So we have Craig Wilkinson from South Africa, who has written a few books. His concentration is on parenting, and he does some just mind-blowing work on gender equality and gender-based violence in South Africa. And he will also be speaking on next month's summit in regards to parenting and for new parents and new dads. And he does a lot of gender equality in the workplace, and he'll be touching base on that today. Craig, thank you so much for being here today. And then we have Trung Lee from Australia, who his family, he's originally from Vietnam, and his father was actually in the Vietnam War and was rescued from the Australian Red Cross. And his mother was from Malaysia, and she escaped the country because it was so corrupt, and they both came into Australia. And he will speak a little bit more on the Asian cultural background and what it's like to be trying to please your parents, and how he went against the traditional roles of Asian culture and went out on his own and started his own window cleaning business 11 years ago at the age of 18. And so he'll dive into more the workplace and masculinity from an Asian perspective. And then we have Henny Morales, and I really hope I said his last name correctly. And he is coming from the United States in California, giving us so much value in regards to different perspectives for our youth and coming into the workplace. And he's been part of the Foundation for Youth Mentorship through Southern California University, and how they match young people with mentors to help expand their experiences and have them be supported. And there is so much more going on with Henning that I literally I couldn't possibly memorize that, because I need to work on my script memorizing skills. It's so vast, the background that all of the men have on these summits. I'm just so grateful to get to have all 3 of them here to bounce ideas off and share their stories. So gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here today.
Fantastic, great to be here.
Thank you, great to be here.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's start. I'm like, who to start off with first? Each of the gentlemen will have roughly 10 minutes to share a little bit about their personal story and the value that they want to bring to you on their particular subjects, and we'll open up for questions. And if there are no questions, then we'll just get to have them expand their conversation, because I know they have far more to speak on than what they can fit in 10 minutes. So Craig, why don't you start us off, and then we'll go with Henning and Trung.
Fantastic. I look forward to doing that. Great to be here, and just so wonderful to connect with men from around the world, different continents, different countries, different cities, and to have the wonderful lady who's put the whole thing together. So appreciate it, and thank you. Good to be here. It's such a vast topic and quite difficult. So I'm just going to jump right in and talk a little bit about how I got to be involved in this kind of work. I'm a father of 2. My son is now 27 years old. He actually lives very close to Trung in New Zealand. My daughter is now 24 years old, also in New Zealand, studying teaching. And early on in my walk as a dad, I had an experience which really was one of those eye-opening, life-changing type experiences. My daughter, when she was about 2.5 years old, her name's Blythe, doctors said to us that she'd need to have an operation on her heart. She had a small hole in one of the walls of her heart, and she'd need corrective surgery. So when it came time to going to surgery, I said to the doctor, please, to the physician, please can I take my daughter into the surgery? Very scary environment, this little 2.5-year-old girl, and going into the surgery, all these lab coat doctors, gloves and stuff. And so he very kindly let me do that. So I had to scrub up and put on the gloves and the mask, and they allowed me to hold my daughter in my arms as I took her into theater. And they even allowed me to hold the gas mask that we put over her face that put her to sleep. So she fell asleep in my arms, and I handed her over to the physician. Luckily, the technology is phenomenal these days. Instead of an open heart surgery where they rip open the chest and sew it up, they had this catheter that goes into a vein at the bottom of her groin and comes up and pops up the little device. A couple of stitches, a few hours, and she was out again. But her month operation was a great success. When she came around, I was in the recovery room just to greet her as she woke up. 1 month later, we were at my house in Johannesburg having what we call a braai, you would call a barbecue. A couple of friends were around. We were standing outside in the garden, and my daughter Blythe was standing next to me, holding onto my knee, as young girls do. And one of my friends looked at her and said, "Blythe, I believe that you were in hospital recently." And she looked up at him and she said, "Yes." She said, "My heart was broken." And she said, "But my daddy fixed it." I tell you, it was a defining moment in my life because I had to excuse myself. The tears came and I had to regain my masculinity, come back to but she gave me this gift of seeing myself through her eyes. I was her hero. I was the man who fixed her heart. I was the man who could do anything. That was me. And I had to really ask myself the question, am I that man? Am I the man that she thinks that I am? And more importantly, am I the man that she needs me to be? And I realized there and then that I did in many ways hold her heart in my hands, and her brother's heart in my hands too. And how I pitched up as a man and as a father would hugely impact their lives. And this started this journey of masculinity to me, working out and discovering, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be that man that she needs me to be and my son needs me to be? And I realized that this whole journey of fatherhood and of leadership and of whatever the career is and being a citizen and being a man is a parallel journey. There are two things. You learn how to, in the workplace, you learn how to lead. You learn how to fulfill your career. You learn how to be a great colleague, a great leader, a great follower. But at the same time as learning all those techniques, you're learning how to be the man that manifests those techniques. It's all very well and good to learn how to be, learn fathering techniques, learn how to discipline, et cetera, but what your greatest fathering tool is yourself as a man, how you pitch up as a man, what values, what character you have as a man. And I started this journey and I had to ask myself the question, am I that man that I need to be, that the world needs me to be, that the world wants me to be, that will be the gift to the world that I'm designed to be? And the question and the answer came back, in some ways, yes, I am. In other ways, there's a lot of work to be done. And this journey began, and it starts with looking in the mirror. And I realized too, through the years, and particularly in the last decade, I say, masculinity has really been under fire. I'm sure you guys, brothers, men from around the world would agree. Masculinity has really come under a lot of fire. You ask 100 men what it means to be a man. You ask 100 women what it means to be a good man. You're going to get 100 different answers. There's a lot of confusion about what masculinity is. And even worse, masculinity has come under fire. In South Africa, we have a massive problem with gender-based violence. We have this hashtag that's gone around that says, #men are trash. You've got the term toxic masculinity. Recently in the UK, they did a very reputable research survey was done on masculinity. And then the question was asked of a broad variety of men from different ages and stages, is masculinity a good thing or is it a bad thing? The older guys generally said, masculinity is a good thing. The men between 18 and 24 that were surveyed, 46% of those men came back and said that masculinity is a negative thing. And for me, that's a catastrophe. If we as men believe we're bad, how are we going to pitch up? We're either going to rebel and get very pissed off and angry and come across aggressive and there's going to be a backlash, or we're going to withdraw into all kinds of escapes and we're going to fail to pitch up. So this issue of what it means to be a man and the validity of being a man is such a crucial thing. And thank you, Alicia, for putting such a wonderful conference together, because really it addresses this issue of what it means to be a man. Most men grow up, and I'm taking a roundabout route before I get into the workplace, but most men grow up really looking for two things. And they look for these two things from mostly their biological father, but it doesn't have to be, an older man or a group of older men. And the two questions are, do I have what it takes? Am I the man? Am I enough? Am I fast enough, strong enough, cool enough, big enough, good enough? Am I just enough to be to this world what it expects me to be, what it needs me to be? That's the first question. And an older man or older father needs to validate his son and say, you've got what it takes. You're the man. You're enough. You see, when a man grows up validated in his masculinity and in his personhood and in who he is, he doesn't have to fail to pitch up. He doesn't have to prove himself in a variety of different ways. He doesn't have to withdraw into all kinds of addictions. He can be the man without having to prove the man. He is who he is. He's authentic. The second big question he brings to his father is, model to me and show to me what it means to be a man. What are the qualities of masculinity and manhood? You see, we live in a world where I talk about the 4 big lies of masculinity. And it's basically sex, power, money, and big boys don't cry. I mean, they come in various different forms, but these are the lies. You know, the more women I can win over in bed, the more of a man I am. The more power I have, whatever form it might be muscle, might be political power, it might be whatever the case, the more of a man I am. And the more money I have, the more of a man I am. And by the way, big boys don't cry. You know, I can't be vulnerable. I can't share my weaknesses. You know, Henning, I'll come across Henning and say, "Hey, Craig, how are you doing?" I might be dying inside. But, "Hey, Henning, I'm great, my friend. And how are you?" You know, it's this bravado. It's a sense of I have to always have it together. And these are the 4 lies that men grew up with. And in the absence of older men teaching young men how to be a man, we grow up confused, and we take our cues from Hollywood, and we take our cues from rap stars and sports stars and politicians of various sorts and corporate, and we get the wrong impression. We get the wrong sense. I want, you know, there's so much more to say. I'm going to hand over to the other guys, but I think that we need to move from a conversation of being either or to a conversation of being both and. And true masculinity is a powerful, beautiful, wonderful gift to humanity. It absolutely is. It loves, it serves, it honors, it protects, it provides. True masculinity in the workplace is all about creating safe space. It's about creating equal opportunities for anyone and everyone, no matter what their background, no matter what their gender. Creating a space where each person can flourish and thrive and fulfill their potential to the absolute max. We live in a world where we need to have men who can be kings, but at the same time be servants. A king and a servant. It's a beautiful thing contained in one. Men who can be warriors. They're not afraid to be competitive and competitive and to be driven, but at the same time, they're lovers. They don't do this at the expense of anyone else. We need men who can be Rambos and poets. It's a both and proposition. And I think when we bring this to the workplace, everybody wins. Everybody wins. So that's basically a bit of an introduction, and thank you for that 10 minutes. I'll hand over to whoever comes after me.
That's so fantastic. Thank you so much, Craig. I love what you just said about the kings, because there's the line from my favorite poem, If, by Rudyard Kipling, saying that if you can walk with kings, but not lose the touch. And you also touched on Hollywood, and I think that's just so perfect. Since Henning is a screenwriter and producer, and he has written books, and he's produced a lot of really beautiful independent films. And part of the reason that I'm so grateful to have him here is because Henning doesn't fall into the typical Hollywood crowd. His movies have a message, like And Hero, that he's promoting through RevShare Films, and 3 other films that he has coming up really soon, and helping to bring a heightened awareness to teen suicide. So it's a really convenient transition. So thanks for bringing that up. And Henning, thank you so much for being here today. We'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Craig. That was very well spoken, Craig. Thank you for sharing your story. And for me, it's really started for me as a teenager in terms of trying to figure out what it means to be a man. You know, coming of age. I had my sports, my coaches as mentors. Those were all my mentors. My wrestling coach, my football coach, my baseball coach. And I was going to be a professional baseball player, and that was my only and sole purpose as a teenager. And I made the all-star teams, the traveling teams. We won the New Jersey State Championship baseball. I was starting third baseman, and I wanted to replace Greg Nettles at third base for the New York Yankees. That's all I wanted to do. That was my goal, and so. It was easy as a kid when you have that, when you have those mentors who you hold to a high level you hold in high regard. And I knew what, again, in my mind as a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, what it would mean. I had in my mind the virtuous characteristics that I would strive to embody, if you will. And due to a sports injury, I was no longer able to play sports. Sports is over all of a sudden. And that's a whole long drawn out story of how that happened and why that happened. But basically, it left me lost. It left me without mentorship. It left me without any type of direction in terms of where am I headed? Like and I'm 15 years old and I have no idea what's what, because my mentors are gone, my coaches are gone, the older players that I used to try to impress, if you will, they're gone in terms of from my life. And, what do you do then? And I really fell into a downward spiral. And I write about that time, about the depression I fell into, and the challenges of a striving to be successful juvenile delinquent. I wanted to be the best. If I'm going to be a juvenile delinquent, I'm going to be the best there was. They're going to remember me. And that was my life, and totally lost. And again, going back to some of what Craig brought up, who do you look towards for the example, for the positive example? And there was no one to look towards. And I used to hold back in sharing my story because I didn't grow up in any type of depravity. I didn't grow up in an abusive household. I didn't grow up around drugs and alcohol. And I grew up middle class, or even upper middle class, if you will. My father was a doctor. My mother was a nurse. And yeah, they were divorced, but there was nothing. We never lacked for any type of attention, really. But because I was so involved with my friends and involved with sports, my father was kind of not really involved, and he wasn't into that. He wasn't into the sports scene. He never came to one baseball game, and it never bothered me really until I found myself without anybody to look towards, and I really didn't know, my father as well as I could have or should have. And again, that's another one of the things that I teach in my courses, and also in my films, and creating these characters. And is always, I always will have in my story structure a mentor figure for these young men, because if finally I eventually found a group of mentors. I found a group of young and slick motivational masters, and that's what turned it around for me. People who were like, Carlos Cicada, who could light up a room just walking in, and they would just go and go and go. And I was mesmerized by this group, and I said, well, if I could be like that, this is a group of men, young men, that I can strive to look up to. And it's, getting back to the theme, and the theme of masculinity, and how, as I was coming of age, how I saw things. I always saw that to be a righteous man, to be a worthy man, you're a solid citizen, you're a good person. You are somebody who looks after other people. And no matter how bad my delinquency spree was, I would never pick on a weaker kid. I would never do anything. And I felt like a sense of honor, like I'm going to be like the guy that only picks on like the big kids, right? And the bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? And in some way, I had that kind of righteousness, built into my psyche and what I want to become. And when I met this group of people, that's what I strived towards. And they were doing some things that were not very forthright, but they were doing a lot of things that really helped me, and it got me on the right track. And since then, I went back to school and I studied. I reconnected back with my father, and he became my best friend after I kind of had to come of age on my own. But he also did set an example. He was somebody who, kind of the strong, silent type, and he didn't say much, but when he spoke, you listened, and he had a lot of wisdom. But because of English being a second language, and he didn't have the communication skills that I would have probably appreciated. So when it comes down to it now, basically what I do is I mentor young men, and I mentor them through my courses, but more recently through these movies. And it's funny or interesting, I should say, that Alicia, reached out about this summit and this panel with the specific topic of masculinity, because in my stories, now my stories are all based on, my movies are all based on true stories. So either what's happening in this movie, either it happened to me or it happened to a friend of mine. And or multiple stories combined into one. But I will always make sure that the male character that's the lead character is a masculine character. And I'll share those traits how I see it. But I also have my female leads are very feminine, but they're strong as well. So the masculine characters and the feminine female characters, it's very obvious. Even just watching the trailers, you can see what's going on here. Like these are strong characters. And what I attempt to bring out in these male characters is an openness and a vulnerability to seek out help and to seek out mentorship and seek out coaching that a lot of kids don't, young men, I should say, they don't seek it out. They don't want help. Craig said, big boys don't cry, don't complain, everything's great. That's not healthy. What's healthy is if you're having a problem, then you open up and you become open to mentorship. So all of these male characters, Alicia, they all have mentors that they follow. And if the characters don't follow the good mentors, bad things happen to them. Bad things happen. All right. So, a young man, to wrap up, how I see it, and really it's brought out in these characters that I develop in these stories, and it's for a young man, it's okay to be strong. It's okay to be competitive. It's okay to feel like you want to take care of somebody else. You want to be the leader. All those things are positive characteristics. At the same time, if you're not open to mentorship and coaching, then your over willingness to develop those other areas will cause damage. Could cause damage to yourself, cause damage to other people, and that's where you see the negative stereotype or the negative labeling that Craig was talking about. It's almost like masculinity run amok. You got to check these things, and you check them through open-mindedness, through being open to mentors and coaches, being open to the knowledge that other people have. And that's how you can discipline your masculinity to really not only be more effective in your work, in the workplace, but also be a happier person.
Thank you so much for all of that, Henny, as always, delivering a tremendous amount of value. And we'll make sure and drop links for everybody in case people are interested in their programs, their books, their films. Yes, I'm really excited about all of that. Trung, thank you so much for your patience. And I love how it was a nice segue as Henny talked a lot about discipline, because I know that there's been a lot of discipline in what you've been doing in your work and the connection to your family and just that Asian culture and how much that weaves in through there. So Trung, take us away. Tell us about your journey.
Awesome. Thank you for the acknowledgement. But thank you for Henny bringing me on the journey. I just felt like I just watched this movie. So first of all, my journey started when I was born, from the point where my mum was heavily in business. She was running a bakery, and when I was in her womb, she was going through, I don't really want this child. I want to focus on business. I need to make money so I can survive. And that blueprint that was ingrained in me, that's how I showed up in the world. And for the first 2 years of my life, I was bounced around different foster cares. I was bounced around different families that was able to help my mum and my dad during the process of building the bakery. So they were able to feed me. They were able to bring me to a private school. And I say this with so much love, but at that age, before language, all I needed was love. And I guess that relationship with masculinity at that age, there was no labels to it, but it was just energy. And it was like, I was just longing for acceptance. I was just longing for approval. I was just longing for them to be around me. And that upbringing, or that stage of my life, started to play out through my whole journey. And it was reflected at school, where my parents brought me to an all-boys school for the first 7 years of my life. So my relationship with masculinity was so carefree. I was surrounded by my male friends. We would play cricket. We would do all these sports. And I guess for me, I had a very healthy relationship with masculinity. But then once the school transitioned to a co-ed education, then there was an introduction to females. And from playing football at lunch to going to the canteen and just chilling and having conversations, that was a big shift to my identity. And I was like, oh my God, who am I? And I was like testosterone, hormones, and that was an experience that defined who I am right now, where I am on the journey of having different masks that I put on when I speak to a female or when I speak to a male. And yeah, and moving forward to a little bit more about the culture upbringing that I had, and coming from an Asian background, the blueprint of how I should show up is I should obey. I shouldn't talk too loud. I should just do what my parents tell me because I'm a good boy. And those were the stories and the conditions that were ingrained in me. I will listen, I will obey. And there was an experience when I was 21 where my dad organized an arranged marriage for me. And as a young boy, still trying to find his place in the world, I just agreed. Even though every cell in my body was saying, no, Trung, this isn't right. You need to honor and respect yourself. But the conditioning and the love that I had for my dad, I put my needs and my desires in the back seat. And I was so close to agreeing with it, to the point where I went to Vietnam 4 times that year, got the papers signed, went on my honeymoon, and there was this little part, I still remember that moment where there was this little voice, whatever you want to call it, God, universe, whatever it was like, Chung, it's enough. And I still remember that moment where I just tapped into it. And I was like, I love you, Chung. And then I had the courage to come up to my dad and look him in the eyes. I can't do this. I cannot do this. And that was the very first time for me to say no. And from that moment, my dad didn't, at his level of consciousness and how he dealt with his confrontation, he didn't talk to me for 12 months. And he just, he didn't talk to me for 12 months. And I had to go through my journey. I went through states of depression, states of finding myself, states of finding my boundaries. And that's one of the biggest fails you can do in the culture, in the Asian culture, is to disown your dad's word. Doesn't matter what you achieve, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter anything. But if you go against your family's word, that is what you get remembered by. And that was the very first time for me to step out of this container, this dogma, and this matrix that I created for myself. And I started to create these wings behind my back. And that's when I also started my window cleaning company, where I did quite well during high school. I got into business law, and that journey wasn't for me, as I couldn't see myself working for anyone else. but just to have the experience to tell my dad that I'm not going to go down that path, and I'm choosing to build a life around my needs. And just even from that process, oh, you went to a private school all your life? I do this for you, and now you do a cleaning job? Just the label of cleaning, oh, bang, back into the slumps. And it's like, oh, it's like all these labels and all these like culture conditioning that's been so heavily ingrained in me. It felt like it was my journey to like step out of all these things that define this culture, physical being. And it's like, yeah, so that kind of put me into the field of stepping out in the world, doing things based on my terms. And only until recently, maybe 5 years ago, until my dad really started to accept me. Except at that stage of my evolution, you know, I was very in the head, egoistic, and I really resonate with Craig in regards to the power. Like, I had the money, I had the empire that I built, I had the dad that I could impress because now I have an empire. And go, put it on a plate and go, Dad, look at me now. I made something out of my life. And until I started to go down the journey of like, I was very in the head, but then I started to tap into the heart. And then I realized that all these things that I created for myself, this financial freedom, this time freedom, this, like, just all these things that were important to me were no longer my identity. And that brought me to the journey of where I am now, where I'm very new and amateur to this this space of self-development. But oh my God, I am absolutely loving this experience. I've just got so much, like Craig just, oh my God, I had my notebook out. I was just like, oh my God, so good, so good. And like Henny just explaining just the way he visualizes creativity. It's just like, oh, this is what brings me life force, and this is what brings me so much joy. So just to be in this platform right now is such an honor. But just to bring it back to masculinity and bring it back to my culture upbringing, the more I'm able to disconnect from the norm of I am Asian, I have these dogmas, I have these conditioning, and to step into my relationship with masculinity, well, it's very new to me, and I don't have it right now, but I am gonna journey with it, and next month I might be able to share it with you. So there, that's a little bit about my journey. I'm all about meeting me where I'm at, trying to be the authentic, and yeah, just enjoying the healing journey. And I know that if I continue to be in this space, then you guys will mirror parts of myself that has been hidden for such a long period of time. And as Craig has said, big boys don't cry, but I do cry, and I love a good cry. And yeah, I just beyond grateful. My heart is just right now. So yeah, that's me checking out, and I'll give it back to the host.
That was such a beautiful share. Thank you so much, Trung. Yeah, just such a heartfelt experience. Is there anyone on the panel that, like anybody here, that would like to ask any questions, trip in about their own experience? Any of the other speakers, don't feel afraid to ask each other questions or make comments. Henning and then Julio.
Well, I appreciate Trung sharing so openly, you know, your story, and I think we all three of us have talked about fatherhood, and I think Trung and has a different take, and maybe culturally or not, but I think that maybe we touch on that subject a little bit, because the impact that our fathers, have on us is not a light. It's not a light impact. That's a big deal. And I know, because the story that Craig has just shared, he takes that responsibility very seriously. And I've got three. I've got a 22-year-old who is a pilot now, and I've got 12-year-old twins, boys. I've got a girl also, but girls are different. Girls are a whole nother breed. You can't. You have to have. It's like in the class of parenting. If you're doing parenting classes, there's got to be 101 and 201. Boys are 101. Girls are probably 501. And it's a whole other thing. And so my daughter is 19 now. And with the twins, and also with the older one, it's so important to have to set an example and to teach about what it means to be a man. It's just so important. And I think that it's not talked about enough. It's not something that, again, maybe I hope people are not shy to teach a boy what it means to be a man. And with my older one, and again, it doesn't mean anything except I like to call it the hero's journey. And it's what we write. We write a character to be a hero, and really it's developing these boys into heroes, heroes, good people. And also, again, because they're boys, it's different. You do it differently with boys than you do with girls, and you're teaching different you're focusing on different areas of their development. And with my older one, he's not as rough and tumble, right? So can you be calm, a calmer personality, a kinder personality, and still be masculine, and still become a good person and a good leader? Of course you can. And that's how he did it. The twins are a whole nother story. They are as rough and tough as it gets. And they're almost at a point right now where the two of them could take me, right? They're just about at that point, right? Where they can take me. Not yet. And so I call it the rule of 12. They think I make these things up, which I kind of do. It's the rule of 12, and there are certain things that you can do with a 12-year-old that you can't do an 11-year-old, and we're going to get to that next level. And if they're rougher and tougher, they just need more physical contact, and you give them what they need, but at the same time you temper that aggressiveness with kindness. You teach good citizenship. You teach to care about somebody else. You teach leadership. And I tell you, if you just I do my best to set the example, but at the same time, each of them is different. And lastly, Trung, my father was a doctor. He was an anesthesiologist. And my father grew up poor in the Dominican Republic, like literally no shoes until he was 13 years old. That's how poor he was. And he studied to become a doctor, and he got like 18 degrees, and he moved to the United States, to New York, and he became licensed in like 13 states, because he always thought if I can't get a job in New York, I'd go to Illinois or Arizona or somewhere else. He had all these degrees. And try having a conversation with your father, who's got all the degrees and went through all that, and tell him that you're dropping out of high school. Try to have that conversation. And it's not the same culture, but it's a similar result. No talk to you. No son of mine is going to be a high school dropout. Goodbye. And so your father is, fatherhood is such an important role, Alicia. And I think that those of us who are fathers, we need to step up our game a little bit and take it a little more seriously. Even if we do, just do a little better, and I think that will make a big difference across the board.
Thank you so much, Henning, for all of that. I love that we have people from so many different countries on this call right now. And I don't know everybody on this call, but I know that there are at least 3 other men from different countries that are fathers on this call. And if any of you would like to chip in about your experience, Julio, you'll go first because you raised your hand first. But if anybody wants to go after him, please do feel free to speak on that.
Well, thank you. I hope that I can talk because I'm so moved and I love what is happening just right now at this summit. But I have a question for Trung regarding those moments that he shared with us about his father and when he got the courage to go and talk to his father and say, I won't do it. So that's from your experience talking to your father. But what was going on with the woman in your family? I mean, if you got a mother or a grandmother, what happened with them when this moment happened over there?
Beautiful question. Yeah, so my dad and mother, my mum stayed in the relationship just to keep the kids, just to keep the dad happy and just to keep the family in a unit, but they would fight constantly. And when my dad asked me to go overseas to get married, my mum disagreed, but she still followed because to hold on to the family name is when the dad has its status. And that's so ingrained in us that dad makes the decision, dad runs the family, dad has the power. And mum followed me overseas and she nurtured me. She looked after me, even though she reminded me that it's okay, you don't have to do it. And my mum played that role. But then my dad invited the role of my grandma, where my dad wanted to bring my grandma back to Australia, and he told me that if I could get married to her, then she could help look after my grandma. And to be honest, like, I say this and I might put my dad in this light, but it was just where he's at, and his intention was love. He just had a different vibration or different way of delivering that, where I disattached from the self-victim mode and I stepped into my dad's shoes, where he had to escape his country to start a new life. His dad didn't even show him any attention. So his relationship with love, he did the best he could with what he had. And until I was able to realize that he did the best he could with what he had, I was just, great gratitude started to move through me. And I was just like, my dad actually helped me to find a wife that could support me, help me, nurture me. And there might be a bit of culture differences because I've been brought up in Australia, but at that stage of my evolution, I was like, how could he break my heart? How could he be so inconsiderate? How can he put someone else's life in front of mine? So it's like, I. But I had to go through that to realize that love is the answer. And that was how my dad communicated love to me at that stage of his life. I hope that answers your question. Does it? Awesome. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much, Trung. I really appreciate your vulnerability. And Julio, thank you for your ask. It's such a beautiful thing. Julio, now you're in Mexico. Do you want to drop a little bit of a line in regards to what it's like culturally in your part of the world? Just real brief.
Yeah, well, we got kind of like a same culture as, just saying that way, like in Asia. There's this father figure, strong, and the one that is always saying what is going to be done. And the worst thing that you could ever try is just go against your father's willing, because he's the man and you're supposed to obey and do nothing but just follow the path. And I believe we're a lot of people down here that they don't even question. And I listen to that in the companies and in the business, especially the family business, that they just go over there and go with the flow. And if the father is the owner of the business, then even though they don't like that, they just assume the role of the CEO or whatever. So I see that we are so conditioned, and I love to hear all the experience, because in the same way, I think we got this, as Craig was saying, those 4 great lies, and I think they are spread all around the world. It doesn't mean if you say it in Chinese, in Spanish, or in German, or in English. There are just great big lies, and I love to share that lies to others, and especially I love to listen to all of you guys. Thank you
so much.
Alicia.
You're very welcome. And tomorrow, Julio is going to be working with us and the horses. So if you have the chance to drop in tomorrow to experience that and all he has to offer with his beautiful herd down in Mexico, then that will be fantastic. We just have a couple of minutes left before we'll be wrapping up, and Calvin will be taking us on another set of exercises. Are there any last minute words, contributions from speakers, or questions from anyone here?
I think this is such a wonderful conversation. It's the kind of thing that can go on for hours and hours. I mean, just building on what Henning was saying earlier about, you know, the drivers of the masculine soul, you know, the rough and tumble. I remember when my son was 11 years old, I said to him, Luke, what do you want to do for your birthday party? You can do anything you want, you know, as long as it doesn't cost too much. And he comes up with this list, and the list is, he took me seriously. He said, here's the list, Dad. He said, I want to invite all my friends around and we want to wrestle you. You know, Henning, you say you can take on the 2 guys, man. I had about 14 guys to take on. I had a sore stomach for another week, but I want to all my friends to wrestle you. Then we want to have an arm wrestling competition. Then we want to play some rugby. Then rugby's very big in my part of the world. Then we want to have some fireworks. But he said, Dad, I don't want to just light the firecrackers. Can we blow something up, please? You know? And then he wanted to have a barbecue, and then he wanted to play PlayStation the whole night through. And I tell you guys, we did this, and it was just, you could smell the testosterone in the air. It was crazy. It was mayhem, you know, absolute mayhem. And I looked at my son and I thought, you know, where does this come from? You know, this drivers of the masculine soul is a beautiful thing. There's a guy called John Eldridge who writes a beautiful book called Wild at Heart. And he says there are 3 core drivers of the masculine soul. The desire for a battle to fight, the desire for an adventure to live, and the desire for a beauty to pursue. And I love that. You know, the battle doesn't have to be physical macho. It can be a chess, you know, anything. But, you know, look at any movies that men have made famous, you know, the Rocky, Rambo, Die Hard, you know, the whole James Bond. It has those 3 themes, the battle to fight, the fighting against the evil, and the adventure, the car chases, the mayhem, the madness. And there's always the beauty. You know, there's always the beauty that we're doing all this stuff for. And I think I often see masculinity like it's like a car, and it's or like a gun. A car is a beautiful thing, you know, it gets us from A to B, but it can also be a very dangerous thing. You got to learn how to drive a car. You got to learn how to drive within the lines and stop at the stoplights and the traffic lights and keep within the speed limit. And you need somebody who knows how to drive a car to teach you how to drive a car. You need someone who's a man, who's been a man and knows how to be a man to teach you how to drive that thing called masculinity. You know, you take a weapon, it can be a terribly destructive thing, or it can be something that helps save lives. But you need someone who's a weapon instructor to teach you how to do that. Masculinity is the same, you know, it's got this driver, battle, adventure, beauty, but how do we drive it? And we need older men and we need mentors to teach us and show us how to use this. Because when you know how to use it, it's a beautiful, wonderful gift to humanity. So, so great seeing all you guys, connecting with you men. And I just, you know, hope this conversation carries on and grows broader and broader. It's so needed. Masculinity, beautiful gift to humanity, but we need to know how to drive it.
Thank you so much, Craig. I really love how you just put that all together as metaphor, just great visuals. I felt like I was right there with you and like your boys at the birthday party, and I was like, that sounds so fun. Because I was just diving into the masculine part of myself for a minute and like wanting to like live in that, we have that balance of masculine and feminine in all of us, right? And how do we continue to create that balance and foster it? Being able to be like our whole selves by embracing both sides.
Absolutely.
All of you men have been incredible. Thank you so much for such a fantastic conversation. So deep and so true, so vulnerable. It was truly a thing of beauty. And so now, and I'll make sure and drop those links so that guys now and in the future can find you and be able to deep dive further into those conversations, because as you said, they could go on for hours. And Calvin will and for those of you that are new here, he is a part of Exodus Adventures that he created, and he does all sorts of fun things in coaching. He's been on his own show that I always forget the name of the show you were on, Calvin. I'm so sorry, my friend. And then after that, we are going to have the incredible Orson Welles, who is going to deep dive into a very important conversation about masculinity and business and politics and racism, something that is very rich and kind of reactive in some places in this world. So I'm really grateful that he's here and he's stepping up. He's a coach and a podcaster and just a really cool guy. I'm excited to have him here. So Calvin, take us away, my friend.
Thanks, Lucy. I appreciate that. And before I get started, I just wanted to just say thank you to Henning, to Craig, and to Trung for just sharing that that talk, just because what I find really beneficial in all of this is the opportunity to not only talk about man's stuff and men's things in a safe environment, but also give encouragement that there are areas out there where men can be men and young men can express themselves in a way that's healthy and positive, and they're not feeling condemnation, they're not being looked down upon, that there's freedom there. Craig, thank you for sharing that story. That is a huge encouragement that isn't shared a whole lot for whatever reason. I've got my own theories as to why that is, but how often do you get a chance to hear about young boys saying, yeah, I want to wrestle, I want to have fun, I want to have fun with my dad, I want to be able to do those types of things, and not feel that it's terrible or it's bad or it's not okay. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Calvin.
That needs to be shared more, obviously. And just a little bit before I start exercising my background, my dad was a Vietnam vet. So I've got a whole bunch of things that I've had to work through in terms of what it means to be a true man that can share feelings and not hold things in. So I'll share here and there about my life experience as an African-American man in the United States that had to learn in another culture, in a Japanese culture, what it means to find myself outside of the United States. Fascinating story. I was in the Air Force for 8 years as a Russian and Chinese linguist, had the opportunity to do some really cool stuff. My rite of passage was going through survival school. And then through survival school, I learned that I had the mettle to make it. And because I had the mettle to make it, things that I learned from that was that it is so important to be emotionally and physically fit. So I took fitness as my lifestyle. And so what I do is I help people find fitness again in their lives so that way they can live life as an adventure. That's what I do. And I love it. I love it in my life. I love it in sharing with young people. I love it with sharing with older people. It doesn't matter how old you are. Fitness is probably one of the most important aspects of my sanity that helps me to stay calm each and every day and hopefully encourage others to do the same. So with that, just with like the next few minutes, I'll be sharing each time I get a chance to come on, just different exercises that you can do at home in the midst of a pandemic. If you don't need to go to the gym, you don't have to worry about having to wipe down things all over the place, but just simple exercises and important aspects of our lives to be able to just take care of ourselves. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, no one else is, right? So with that, let's take some nice deep breaths, 5 of them in through the nose, out through the mouth, just to be grateful that we can be able to sit here and be a part of such an epic opportunity of dialogue and communication. I'm really grateful for this whole platform and hearing what everybody is doing and what how you're sharing and how you're showing up today. This is cathartic, not only for me, but hopefully for everyone else that's on board as well. Just a few more deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Just a couple more. One more. Great. So as I'm rolling the shoulders, I notice that I keep a lot of tension in my shoulders. So a lot of times what I try and do is I try and roll the shoulders and make sure that they're nice and loose, because sometimes I'll notice that when I'm sitting around that my shoulders start to rise up, and that and then my shoulders become part of my ears. And then I'm walking around like this, and I don't want to do that. I want to be nice and relaxed and loose. And so shoulders are something where we hold a lot of our tension. And so another thing that I do is I take one arm behind the back of the head and I bring the elbow in to try and really open it up and open up my body, because sometimes just stress seems to build and hold in our bodies. And so I like to try and loosen it up and release it. And then I'll switch. Same thing, just nice and relaxed and loose, and continuing to breathe. Nice. And then just relax. Make sure my neck is nice and relaxed and loose. And then since we're doing a lot of sitting and stuff like that, the last half of this seminar will stand up. But for now, I'm sitting in a chair, and it's really easy to get stuck in our chairs. So what I like to do sometimes to keep it interesting is that I'll move the camera down, as I'll place my hands next to my hips. I'll come off my chair and I'll just do a couple of tricep bench dips. Now, sometimes people have problems with their shoulders. So instead of doing a lot of movement, I'll just hold it in order to work my tricep and shoulder muscles. So that way it helps to get them nice and worked out. Just a quick blood flow that I'll do, probably maybe 5 or 6 of those. And just to get going, nothing crazy, but just something to be able to do while we're waiting and in between speakers and whatnot. So if you can pump out 5 or 6, that would be great. If you're not sitting down, you're standing up. Another exercise that I like to do is that I will, and I'll show you the side motion. I'll bring my arms back, and then I'll try and clap them together. And I'm really trying to squeeze, bringing my chest out to try and open up an area of my body that I haven't opened up in such a long time because I'm so stuck going forward. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be able to open it up, try and squeeze my hands, and then relax and release. Again, I'm going to squeeze and then relax and release. I'm going to do 3 more. Squeeze and relax and release. 2 more. Squeeze, relax and release. And then 1 more. Squeeze and relax and release. And so with that, I am grateful to be a part of this epic summit. So take it away, Alicia.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Calvin, for keeping us moving. It can be a lot to sit in one place for so many hours. Yes. And thank you, gentlemen, for participating in our fun time.